In this video, we're going to look at the top 5 most common questions that are asked in Safeway interviews, and I'm going to help you plan fantastic answers that are going to get Safeways really interested in hiring you. So we're going to start with a question that is asked in every Safeway interview, and that is simply, what shifts can you do at Safeway? They are very interested in knowing exactly what times you can work, and this will really, to a great extent, inform their hiring decision. So to be successful, you have to get a few things into your answer. You have to start by showing that you're going to meet Safeway's needs. They are basically checking off your answer against what they need in terms of their staffing models. And so if you are mentioning the times that they are interested in, you're going to be more successful. And we're going to give you some suggestions about some times you should be mentioning. You also have to show off lots of flexibility. They would much rather employ someone who's highly flexible and is able to work a large variety of times rather than someone that is going to be very restrictive. And lastly, you have to show that you are committed to Safeway. They can actually judge whether you're serious about the job based on your answer. If you're listing lots of times that you can't do, you're going to mess this question up, and it's going to cause them to question whether you really take your job seriously if there is a long list of things that are way more important than your work here. They would rather employ someone who is going to be committed. The times that you really need to mention to get them interested is things like the evenings and weekends. These are times that are slightly more difficult to staff. People would ideally work, say, 9 to 5, but the stores are open much longer than that. So if you can work evenings and weekends, definitely make a point of mentioning those. Right at the very beginning of the day, at opening time, getting people in ready for the store opening is a really important part of running the business efficiently. So definitely mention that time if you're happy to start early in the morning. Holidays are again more difficult to staff. That's when a lot of people are asking for time off. So if you're happy to work holidays, particularly school holidays, that is a great thing to mention. If you're not happy to work those times, simply don't mention it. They shouldn't be asking about it. And the other phrase that you can get in there that really gets them interested is just say that you are happy to work to meet business needs. So the phrase meet business needs is very reassuring to the manager interviewing you that you're very flexible and you're going to be there when you're needed. And lastly, you really got to prove to Safeway that you've got a can do attitude. So your goal is to say yes to as much as possible. And the trick with this question is absolutely do not mention the times you can't do, only mention the times you can do, because volunteering times that you can't work is not going to help you. The chances are they're probably not going to ask about it. So if you don't specifically volunteer, they are not going to find that out and you're going to score much higher. So the next question you're going to have to prepare for is the what can you tell me about Safeway? Before you go to any interview, you have to be extremely well prepared. You really have to know the company. And by knowing the company, you're going to be able to drop in several key facts throughout the interview, and you're also going to be well prepared if they ask you to tell them about the company, because they want to employ people who've prepared for their interview and not people that haven't prepared. So the first fact that I would share with you is where the name Safeway comes from. So you can think about it as the safe way. So if you go back in history, people could pay for groceries on credit, and that was a common way, particularly that businesses might buy food that they are going to sell on at a different location, for example, they could buy it on credit, whereas Safeway didn't allow this in the early days, particularly during the Great Depression. So buying with cash wouldn't get you into debt. So that is referred to as the safe way to buy. So there's a great fact to drop in because perhaps the manager doesn't even know that and you're teaching them something, and that's going to really impress them. Albertsons is the ultimate parent company currently of Safeway. That's part of a private equity company. You should be aware of that. Some good things to prepare is to know about their slogans. So the current slogan is Fresh Foods, Local Flavors. And so that's really part of their identity. And the big remodeling of Safeway that happened fairly recently around their ingredients for life and the rollout of the lifestyle format. So that's wooden floors and changing Safeway from an industrial feel to more of a pleasant upscale with your Starbucks coffee shop, for example, in the store and better lighting. So lifestyle format really did revitalize the brand. You should also know all of the different own brands. So what are all the different current products that are stocked in Safeway that are made by Safeway? And you should know about their signature range. You should also know that it was founded by Marion Burton Skaggs. So it's part of the Skaggs family that founded a lot of the major grocery chains. And this is going all the way back to 1915. You should definitely learn their profits and their revenue and just have some current numbers. So if you get some of these ideas in, you're going to be able to tell a good story about the company. But my number one tip for preparing for this question is to look up Safeway's Form 10K, because they've issued a lot of bonds and debts. So you can actually read a 10K for the company. And that's got amazing information about the company's strategy, how many stores they've got, where they're located, and a breakdown of all of the businesses within the Safeways group. And so you can read that and you will be so well prepared for your interview. Definitely getting a couple of these facts and you're going to smash this question. So let's look at now at number 3, which is an extraordinarily important question that if you don't answer well, they're going to question whether they should really be giving you the job. So this is the question around why do you want to work at Safeway? And you have to be really compelling in your answer here. So you got to think about what makes Safeway special. So why do you really like Safeways? You've got to be positive about the brand. Think about your previous skills that you developed and experience. Have you worked in grocery before and really enjoyed it? Have you worked in a customer facing role and really liked that? Do you enjoy working with customers? Do you have a lot of knowledge about food? Do you know a lot about the Safeways products? Do you shop there? All of these things you can get into your answer. If you're looking for a long-term career, definitely mention that. So what is the progression? Do you want to be an assistant manager? Would you like to become a store manager in future? Do you see Safeways as being a long-term career? If you do, definitely mention that. It's much better to employ someone for 20 years than employ 20 people for 1 year. It's a lot cheaper, a lot easier to run, a lot less training, and it helps the brand be much stronger to have highly experienced, competent staff. If your interests align with working at Safeways, that's a great thing. So, particularly talking about loving working with customers, working with people, meeting new people, those sort of things are great to get in. But the most important thing for answering the why you want to work at Safeways is to be really, really enthusiastic, because they would rather employ someone that's got some enthusiasm and is really interested in working there than someone who comes across as, I just want a job, I just want to get some money. And there's no passion, there's no enthusiasm for it. So, some great things to mention are that you see it as a long term career. So, talk about the progression scales, how you can move up. If you know someone that works there, talk about what they've said about the company. And if it's really positive, share in that positivity. Talk about what they've said about how great it is to work here. Definitely mention customers. You can't mention customers enough in an interview. That's what the managers are all about usually. They really want to hear a customer focused answer. And if you shop at Safeway and you really like it, talk about what you love about the company. Why do you shop at Safeway? Talk about that as well in your answer and link that to your interests in working there. And if you get all of those things on the tick list and mention as many of those suggestions that I've got, you're going to have a great answer. So let's now look at number 4, which is where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? And you really have to be prepared for this question because it comes up so often. A lot of people simply don't have a plan, so they don't score very well. So it has to be, firstly, something that's credible. So being chief executive of Safeway in 5 years' time from working on the floor is probably not particularly credible. So you need something that is sensible. What does normal progression look like? And I would suggest that's probably 1 level if you're wanting to answer this question in terms of progression, though you don't have to. And I'm going to show you how to answer this question if you're not looking to move up and still score well. You obviously have to have something that's well planned. You have to have thought about where you are now, where you want to be in 5 years, and how you get there. And it is so important that Safeway is a big part of that 5 year journey because they want to hear how Safeway fits into your 5 year plan. Because if your 5 year plan doesn't involve Safeway, well, why are you talking about that at the interview? So you could talk about the road to +1. So how do you get from the job that you're applying for to 1 level higher? 1 level is credible and reasonable. You may be able to move faster if you're really amazing, but 1 level is not implausible in 5 years. However, you could talk about being amazing in your current role. So if you don't want to move up, that's absolutely fine. What you want to do is that in 5 years' time, you're going to be outstanding in all aspects of your job. You're going to be a model employee. You're going to be someone that managers would recommend that new staff be paired with because you set such a good example. And you could, even though you've not moved up, you could be involved in mentoring, training, and supporting new staff members, for example. So things like that are really great to mention if you're not looking for progression. And another thing that's really good to mention is talk about building reputation. So in 5 years' time, you're going to have earned a reputation of being someone who is reliable and someone who is highly competent at their role, and that you do not believe that you should be looking at progression until you are very competent in your area. And you're not talking about moving up as I will be this in 5 years' time. You talk about being amazing at your job and then earning and demonstrating the competencies required for progression. So it's not assumed. A bad answer starts with something that is absurd. So moving ridiculously quickly is a very bad answer, or just not having a very good reason for any of it. Insulting the interviewer is the worst thing you can do. So if you're being interviewed by a store manager and you're talking about becoming the store manager, well, you're basically suggesting that you're going to take their job, or that you're going to be applying for a job that isn't going to be there. So that means that you're going to be leaving. So they can work all that out. And anything that is not relevant to Safeway, just don't mention. If you plan to have children in 5 years' time, that's not the time to mention it. That's not the time to discuss it. If you're talking about getting married, these are all things that are just not particularly relevant. So you're focusing on what Safeways cares about. Where do you see yourself professionally? The absolute worst thing you can do is quitting Safeway, and that includes moving to another store. So in 5 years' time, I want to move closer to my parents. Well, that's not the time to talk about that. Anything that suggests you're seeing Safeway as a short-term job, like I plan to work here and then go to university and never come back, which is usually the implication, even if you don't say it. Do not talk about quitting your job. That is the wrong time to talk about it. So get as many of the good arrow going up the way in, avoid everything on the bad arrow, and don't say you're quitting, and you will be successful in this question. So before we look at some questions that you can ask them, another question that often comes up is a customer refuses to accept the returns policy. What do you do? And we're going to look at this answer in a very general way. So if they ask slightly different questions, like how would you deal with an angry customer, or how would you deal with a rude and abusive customer, or how would you deal with a customer complaint? Generally, the same procedure works for all of those type questions. You can cover any question to do with customer problems with this procedure. So you can start with the phrase de-escalation. So de-escalation means that you're calming the situation down, you're getting everything under control, you're being calm, and you're actively listening to what the customer has to say. You're going to talk about empathy, so definitely get the word empathy in there, that you actually care about the customer's problem, that you sincerely want to help them, and that you're very solutions focused. You are listening, you see their problem, and you want to help them out, but you must make sure that in the interview you reassure them that you're going to adhere to Safeway's policies at all times. You're not going to make up your own policies. You're not going to accept returns that are not allowed under the returns policy. You're going to be steadfast, but empathetic and polite and professional, but you're not going to change the policies. If the policy says that it has to be approved by a manager, you will get manager approval. If the policy says that they are entitled to a refund, you will issue a refund. If the policy says they're not entitled to a refund, you're not going to process a refund that can't be processed. So you're going to always stick to the policies. You don't write those, you follow them. And to be successful, you're also going to reassure them that you don't raise your voice, that you maintain professional at all times, and that you stay calm. You're always going to be calm, polite, and friendly at all times, regardless, because you are a representative of the Safeway brand. So get the three ideas about de-escalation, empathy, and following the policies, staying calm, and never raising your voice, and you're going to ace this question. So let's finish by looking at some questions that you should be asking. So definitely ask about the team that you'll be working with here. That shows a real interest in your co-workers. Ask what the favorite thing that the interviewer has about working at Safeway and share in their enthusiasm. So if they say something that sounds quite good, talk about why you find that interesting, why you would really like that. So you're having a really positive end to the interview. Ask them what you should do now to be super prepared for starting a Safeway, because that shows a commitment, and you can make commitments there and then that they say you need to do this before you start, and just say you're going to do it and turn up to your first day at work having done it, and you will make a really positive impression. A clever question that you can ask at the end is, what does an amazing Safeway employee look like? What are the characteristics of an amazing Safeway employee? And hopefully the manager will say exactly what the criteria they are looking for in hiring someone is. And at the end of the interview, you take that opportunity to go back through your previous answers and politely remind them of how you actually match what they are looking for. And lastly, you have to make up one question on the day. You can't pre plan it, you can't memorize it. You've got to think of one question that relates to something that has been said at the interview. And you will think of lots of things, but you have to take a mental note as it comes up. So I wish you the best of luck in your Safeway interview. And finally, thank you very much for watching.